Yes. Hello, everybody. Good to see you all. My name is Danny Katz, and I've been told just like 2 days ago that I'm chairing this event, which is just, I don't even know what you do. I don't know anything about small furnishings. I don't know what you do with the chair. What is it, Arnold?
You eat it. That's
you eat the chair. So, yeah, look, I will just do my best, and we will have fun on this quite warm Melbourne evening. The city's going off! I haven't been out of my house. As a writer, you don't get out much, and there's people out there drinking and busking. It's incredible. Melbourne's going off. I'm very excited about it. Okay. This is our book. Well, it's not our book. It's kind of many people's book. Yeah?
Yeah.
There's 26 writers, or maybe even 27. Do we count you, Arnold? You didn't really contribute. You just wrote a preface.
Can I go home now?
People just churn that stuff out. But me and Shalini. Okay, here we are. I'm Danny Katz, Arnold Zable, Shalini, Akhil. Yes. And me and Shalini put in the hard yards.
Yeah, totally.
Okay? We actually wrote something.
What a wanker.
Constructed that at the beginning, a middle, and an end.
It took ages.
Yes, it did. You wrote, like, a preface. Okay. Good. Nice work, Arnold. And, but you're a good man.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Yeah, you put in.
Did you see what he wrote about me in the article? He actually had a go with me in the book.
You're a good
In
man.
print.
You're a humanitarian.
Forever. It's there forever.
It is. It's there forever. So then there were a whole bunch of other writers, and we wrote about the immigrant experience, all of us being immigrants, and many of you as well, I'm sure. In fact, we probably all are in some way or other. And I'm a Canadian. What are you, Arnold? What are you, mate?
I'm still working it out, actually.
Because the email said you were Greek,
Yeah,
but I don't buy that.
The email said I was Greek, and another email said I was Polish Jewish, and I was actually born in New Zealand. And I used to have a party trick. When I was at uni, I had a party trick, and especially after I had a suntan after the summer, I'd say, "What country do you think I'm from?" And no one ever got it.
But it was
At
something
least-
ethnic.
Yes.
Extremely ethnic.
Yes, I'm a Maori, in other words. You know.
Yeah. Shalini, you are
Fiji Indian.
A
or
Fijian?
Indo-Fijian. So it depends. I was born in Fiji.
Yeah.
But my cultural heritage is Indian.
Right. Because in Fiji there are two main groups, am I right?
There are three main groups. The Chinese, the Indians, and the indigenous Fijians. They make up the majority of the population there. And the Indians came to Fiji in the 1800s as indentured labour at the time of the British Raj. So my great-great-grandfather was basically slave labour, brought out to work on the cane fields. Happy story.
Well, you will tell it at some point in this little session. So look, we all wrote a little piece. The book is called Joyful Strains, which I've been here for 35 years, so I know that that's part of the anthem. In joyful strains and let us sing, oh Canada, oh, something like that.
Yeah.
Is that how it goes? And we also, and I guess the book is about all of our struggles with assimilating. You know, I've come from a very oppressive Canadian regime. You know, it's hard. It was horrible. You know, the Cirque du Soleil just stealing young children to perform tightrope walking routines dressed as ladyboy whore clowns. So, you know, it's horrible. And we got away. I came in 1971. Haven't lost my accent. I see that you two have. But I hang on to mine to get the ladies. Didn't work. So, Shalini, let's begin with you. You came here what year?
Well, it's a bit of a long story. I was actually born in Fiji, but brought up in Sydney. My father was studying in Sydney at the time, so he brought the rest of the family out to be with him while he studied. So I spent the first 8 years of my life in Sydney, hence the accent, because it's where I went to, you know, kindergarten and primary school, that kind of thing. Then we went back to Fiji after he graduated, for the next 10 years. So from 8 to 18, I was brought up in Fiji, and then we migrated to Melbourne after I turned 18.
So you, from 8 to 18, so you did all your schooling there?
Yep.
Okay. And then you came here to do uni?
Yeah, pretty much. They were a bit confused about where I would fit in with the high school program, so I ended up doing another year of... Actually, I lost... When we moved to Fiji the first time, I was put a year back because of the time of the year that we went, so I did an extra year in grade 3. And then when we came back out here, I did an extra year again because they couldn't work out what to do with me. So I turned 20 in my year 12 maths exam. So it's character building.
So what's lovely about your story is you talk a lot about food. Delicious.
Obsessed.
Delicious food. I licked the page. That's how delicious your writing is. I would love you to read for everybody your your opening stuff.
Just the stuff?
Just the stuff,
Okay,
the
cool,
good stuff. Your story is entitled Home and Takeaway.
Okay. The overwhelming sense of wonder I felt when I unwrapped my first cornetto in Melbourne sticks with me to this day. How I marvelled at its preciseness, the cool white of the expertly piped ice cream, tiny chocolate rivulets snap frozen in its ridges and valleys, and the crunch. It seemed just one bite of the waffle cone could trigger an avalanche, similar perhaps to the controlled avalanches they set off in the cornetto factory to send golden nut fragments cascading down to lodge themselves into the waiting ice cream mountains. Before they're wrapped and shipped to people like me? I remember wondering if everyone who unwrapped a cornetto took the time to admire its perfection before devouring it. I certainly hope they did.
Yeah, this is incredible stuff about the cornetto drumstick debate.
Yes.
Okay? Because it's like a Beatles-Stones thing, right?
Yeah.
Tintin Asterix, PC or Mac.
I don't
right?
even know what that is.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What, PC or a Mac? You don't know?
No.
Okay.
I'm a migrant.
But I love that stuff because that's the kind of stuff...
Oh, it was your accent. You said PC or Mac, didn't you? Sorry. I thought you were still talking about bands. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, PC
Just
or
speak slowly.
Mac.
Okay. Enunciate.
Oot and a boot. Oot and a boot. That's how us Canadians talk. What I love about that is that food, I think, plays a huge role in early memories of being an immigrant. My wife has this fantastic old home economics cookbook that has the recipes of for a curry. Okay, so it's all full of scones, pudding, Yorkshire puddings, roast, and then there's just one thing that says Indian curry, and the ingredients are onions. That's a good start. Onions is okay. Mincemeat. I don't know. Whatever you think. Sultanas. Keen's curry powder. Pineapple chunks. You turn the page, nothing else. You look for something else, there's nothing else. Because you would have come from some place that had these amazing curries.
Oh, yeah.
And then you come here to the suburbs, the bland Aussie suburbs. It would have been a shock.
Initially it was. Now it's totally different. And I'm very thankful for it. And I talk a lot about that in my piece. Now you can get things that you would have had a hard time getting in Fiji. You can get them readily here. And it's not just my suburb. I live near Footscray. It's not just that area, but it's pretty much all over Melbourne and most likely all over Australia. But there was a time when everybody thought, when you said curry, they thought sausages and Keen's curry powder. It's not good.
Or deviled eggs. Yes. Arnold, was food a big shock to you when you arrived from New Zealand?
It's a very strange thing. In one way, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here. I mean, I wrote the introduction to this book. And but
it's
actually,
the big paycheck. That's what brought you
and
here.
the book's written by people who have come here from other countries and had to adjust. And there's some wonderful, wonderful stories here. But I was actually a year old when my parents decided to come to Melbourne. And they decided to come to Melbourne because my mother had one surviving sister after the Holocaust, two, one in Argentina and one here in Melbourne, out of 9 siblings. And it was terrible what happened back there. But she decided she desperately wanted to reunite with the one member of the family left, more or less. And so we came to Melbourne, but she came back to Melbourne. She actually arrived in Australia before the war to join her sister, who'd been the first one to leave.
So what, sorry, but was New Zealand her choice?
No. She, I guess the reason I became obsessed with the asylum seeker issue is partly because my mum was kicked out of the country in the 1930s. As I often used to say, I'm alive today because my mother was a queue jumper. To cut a long story short, New Zealand saved her life. She would have gone back to Poland and possibly almost certain death. So there's a long story there, but the short of it is she lived in New Zealand for about 10 years and decided to come to Australia. And she tells me that when the boat, the Wanganui, went across from New Zealand to Australia, she used to carry me around in a shopping bag. And a koshik, we used to call them koshiks. And at one stage I fell from the bag and hit my head on the deck. So that explains a lot. Whenever I have to explain something, I always go back to that. But so we arrived here in Melbourne post-war. And when it came to food, it was very strange. You know, the most common food for dinner was lamb chops. And I can still, there's the distinct smell, you know, even when I go down the back lane that leads to my house in Carlton, I can still remember the smell of grilled chops. But I don't understand, the strangest thing is that there were 3 brothers, right? And she always made 4 lamb chops. So there was this extraordinary thing, who was going to get the 4th lamb chop? And it led to all kinds of sibling rivalries. But look, my mum also was very good at the Jewish cuisine, and the interesting thing was the local shopping centre. The local Rathdown Street shopping centre had Glickman the baker, and it had Gottlieb the greengrocer. It had, to some extent, you could get the foods of the old world. Interestingly enough, Glickman and Gottlieb and several other shopkeepers were Helmer. Now, Helm is the city of fools. It's quite interesting that Rathdown Street Shopping Centre was run by people who came from the city of fools. And Helm is a legendary city. It does exist, but it's also known as a place where... well, let me explain what Helm is all about, right? The people of Helm have a meeting, and the topic is, look, we're so impoverished that we've got to find a way out of poverty. So one of the Helmers says, Yossel, let's call him Yossel. Yossel says, I know how to get out of this problem. He says, I will go to Paris and I'll ask Rothschild to come and live here. So, okay. So off he goes on his mission. He goes to Rothschild's mansion, knocks on the door. The butler opens the door, and he says to him, what do you want? And he says the schlumper. You know, listen to the word, it's onomatopoeic. A schlumper means an untidy person, someone with his shirt tails hanging out, hasn't shaved for days, closes the door. Next day he comes back, he persists, and finally he sticks his foot through the door and he says, I want to say, Rothschild, go and tell him that I know the secret to everlasting life. So the butler goes into the drawing room, and there's this schlumper out there, and he says he knows the secret to everlasting life. Well, show him in, what harm can it do? He comes into the drawing room, he says, Mr. Rothschild, you should come and live in Helm, because never has a rich man died in Helm. Now, I don't know why I'm telling you this story, but really...
It's a killer, that's why.
I know why.
Yeah.
There's always a reason. I mean, my parents and all these communities brought with them not only recipes, they brought with them all kinds of cultures and all kinds of stories and all kinds of wonderful ways. And And we had a community in Carlton. We had a wonderful community. Where our parents recreated the old world in the new.
So did that mean that you never felt like an outsider, you know, when you were going to school and stuff? Did you get bullied for being Jewish or looking different? Or were all your mates there with you?
We were, look, it was a bit of both. I mean, we were multicultural before the word was in vogue. We were just thrown together, Greeks, Italians, Jews, Yugoslavs, and working class Australians. I mean, the interplay between working class Aussies and us kids was very, very interesting, and it had its harmonies and it had its conflicts. I remember, a very important word coming into my vocabulary through, I won't name this guy because I named him once and his sister was in the audience, but there was a chap, a friend of mine at Lee Street State School, and every second word he said was effing this, effing that. And we're walking home one day down Canning Street. He says, "Hey, Arnie," everyone called me Arnie, you want to meet my effing family? And I said, well, why not? So we go to his house.
Why effing not? Yeah.
Well, not yet. You know, I had to learn. And so we get to the house, and he says, "Hi, Mum, I'm effing home." And she yells back, "About effing time." And then I go through the door, and you hear his grandmother say, "Is that you?" Let's call him John. "Is that effing you, John?" "Yes, effing Grandma." So it was one big effing family. But like I said, we did have our conflicts and our harmonies, but basically we kind of got on, and it was very interesting. You had to run the gauntlet. There was a kind of gauntlet. The gauntlet was to play footy and to play cricket, and I was known as the daredevil, the rover and the wingman who would go in and burrow into the packs, and you were accepted if you went through that kind of initiation.
Did you go in harder because you felt like you had to prove yourself?
Oh yeah, I did. There's no doubt about it. And to sum up what it was like, we go in a novel I wrote, Scraps of Heaven. There's a character called Josh, and he's based partly on me, but he's also based on the Nissen twins. The Nissen twins were the smallest, skinniest kids on the block, and Leon and Henry, and they used to get teased mercilessly and sometimes beaten up. That was the way it was. Most bullies are cowards. They'll pick on someone that's smaller. So they thought, look, Henry thought, I've had enough of this. And he heard that Peter Reid, the Australian middleweight boxing champion, had just retired, and he lived in Amos Street, this very same street. And so he goes and he knocks on his door. And Peter Reid opens the door and says, "What do you want?" He says, "I want to learn how to fight." He's about 12 years old. He said, "You're too small, you're too skinny, and you're too young. Fatten up and come back in a couple of years." The next night, knocks on the door. "What do you want?" He just persisted night after night, a bit like the guy who went from Helm to Paris, right? And finally, Peter Reid says to him, "Look, you're so keen, you're so enthusiastic, okay, I'll take you on." Meanwhile, Leon, who's his identical twin, is thinking, what's happened to Henry? He's on a secret mission. So he follows him relentlessly one night. Finally, Henry gives in, and the two of them, can you imagine this, right? This is a true story. They knock on the door. Peter Reid's old father opens the door and turns around to his son and says, "There's two of the bastards." But 6 years later, Henry was offered a world title fight, and Leon became Commonwealth boxing champion. And the last time I saw Henry Nissen, who became a hero, he worked with street kids for many years. He was Father Bob was his mentor. And I think this story says a lot about the sort of fascinating interactions that took place. But the last time I saw him was in mid-January, and I met him in a diner, this old rundown diner down near the wharves, because at the age of 50, after the money ran out for youth work, so he kept doing it for free, and he had to become a wharfie again. And so there's an example, I guess, of someone who, in a way, stayed a working class boy, stayed true to his values, and one of the many, I think, wonderful characters to come out of that life. But he really, if you meet Henry, you'll see the personification of the two cultures really, really melding and coming together. He's loved on the wharves. Yeah. I went down to the wharves with him when we last met, Everyone knew him. Everyone loved him. There's something about him because he was just a very, very genuine sort of a person.
Sure. Yeah. Shalini, did you have issues at school in your primary school days before you went back to Fiji?
In Sydney.
In Sydney?
Yeah, it was weird because I have two older brothers, and two of us, myself and the middle brother, were at school at the same time, same primary school, and we were pretty much the only brown kids there. There was one
What was
other
the suburb?
in Haberfield.
Right.
So it was pretty central. I think at one stage there was one other brown kid there, but we avoided each other like the plague. Like, that's your corner of the playground, this is our corner. And my brother didn't want to talk to me, so there were just these three lonely brown kids hanging out in the playground. But I kind of... It was a weird sort of reverse thing because in Sydney I looked different but I sounded exactly like everyone else. Then when we went back to Fiji I looked like everyone else but sounded like an absolute freak, and people just didn't know what to make of me. And I guess that it's something that's stuck with me till today. But so yeah, it was. But I think I was young, and I just, because I had two older brothers anyway, and I'd learnt to be a bit tough.
Did they look out for you, or you looked out for
yourself?
Oh,
no. No, because I'd been bullied by them at home. I could deal with it at school, But I guess it didn't really. It wasn't apparent to me at the time when I was a young kid because you just don't look out for that kind of thing when you're younger.
Yeah.
But it was more apparent, oddly enough, when I went back to Fiji and sort of had to learn how to fit in with my people.
Yeah.
It was weirder there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Because I didn't get bullied because I was Canadian, because there's nothing to bully. But I got bullied because I was Jewish. And I don't know whether you got this at all, but they had this thing called the Jew Rumble, where you'd be walking down the corridor just minding your own business, and people would start chucking, when there were 2-cent pieces at you. And they were going, pick it up, Jew boy, pick it up. They all came from Texas. I don't know why they said Jew boy. But they were throwing 2-cent pieces at me all the time. And, it was humiliating, and they would all stand around. You'd have to pick them up. I was clearing $20 a day. I wanted to do it as a career.
Well, there was an equivalent, and it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget the other side of it. We had a group of kids, maybe it's too much to call them a gang, but anyway, they used to grab me and they used to actually shove my face into the dirt of the median strip in Canning Street where I grew up and say, it was a bit weird, it's a kiss the ground and say, I killed Jesus. In between, swallowing the dirt, I wanted to say he was just a Jewish rabbi who went off to crack a bet and we've been paying the price.
There's people out there who want to push your face into the ground.
But whatever, there was that other side of it, and it could get very intense. The story of the Nissen twins it personifies a lot of what went on, and it was interesting. I actually spent time in a gym, a back lane gym. You did have to be quite tough. You had to know how to look after yourself. Mind you, we learned very quickly this thing about flight or fight. You see, if someone was your size or bigger, it was flight. If someone challenged you and you thought, oh, maybe you've got a chance, all right, maybe
you
it was
pretty
fight.
Intimidating.
Yes, very intimidating. So it was the smaller ones. But nevertheless, I think it tends to be forgotten. And of course, it's being enacted again and again and again. You've got, just yesterday, you had that, the news has come out that after 6 long years, these African kids from the Flemington Estates, lovely kids. I've met them in the past because they belong to the Flemington Youth Theatre Group and do amazing work in terms of telling their stories on stage and on the high-rise estates. But they fought for 6 years against what they'd experienced in terms of constantly being stopped by the police, constantly being harassed by people, and the assumption that they were loitering with no good intent, etc. So look, it's an ongoing kind of struggle. And the one other thing I want to say is this: that interestingly enough, with Carlton. And it's another aspect of this whole story. with Carlton, I was part of the movement back in the late 60s and 70s to stop the high-rise flats being built, because the plan originally was to really take down all that wonderful housing and replace it with high-rise flats. That was the way you solved the problem of public housing back then. Now, I'm glad we lost just one block. The movement was successful, but I'm glad there is that block of flats in Carlton, because you still have immigrants and the new immigrant groups who can afford to live in that wonderful inner urban suburb. So, look, it's an ongoing story, I guess.
How are we going with time? Are we up to halfway? Because I wanted to ask. For me, my early days in Australia, it was very much about fitting in and trying to be anything I could other than a Canadian Jew. But there came a point where I thought, hang on a sec, this is actually something, I don't have much ammunition physically, to just put myself out there, so this is actually a little party trick that I have. And I think I even sort of put the accent on when I left school. I'm wondering if it was the same for you, that you actually started to use your Fiji-ness, and that is the word, to sort of meet people and get out there.
I'm not sure. I don't think so. I do remember being told, though, that when we first moved back to Fiji, I developed this weird hybrid accent. There was sort of Fijian/Australian, not really Indian, but there's this particular kind of accent in Fiji that crosses the Indian, Fijian borders. And I sounded really weird, and my brothers would relentlessly make fun of me. So then I learned how to switch it on at school and switch it off when I came home. So at school I just sounded like this weird mongrel, and then when I came home I just sounded like the rest of my family, which was, we all speak this way. So yeah, I guess that kind of initial period. And also when I first moved back to Fiji, it was I went to a school where lots of expats went to, so I would hang out with the white kids and didn't make friends with the brown kids. It was really bizarre. And the girls, the Indian girls, didn't like me because I was a bit rough and tumble, so I kind of had my own little niche carved out by the end of it. But then when I got older, they would push me into public speaking competitions. So when I started winning shields for the school, it was like, everyone loves Shalini. But until I got to that point, it was a very kind of confusing
So when
time.
you were in that weird place, did you feel more Aussie than Fijian? Would you have said, that's who I am, when you were mixing with the expats?
Not really. I mean, I think I tried to grasp onto that as much as I could at school, but at home